Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a war film from Bosnia. This is spoken in the Bosnian, Serbo-Croatian, English and Dutch language with English subtitles, released in the year 2020, directed by Jasmila Zubanic, and this film is called QUO VADIS, Aida. So QUO VADIS, Aida is set during the Bosnian War in the 90s. We have the Bosniaks, the Muslim population of Srebrenica, a small town in Bosnia, that are being hounded by Bosnian Serbs. Now, when the fall of Yugoslavia, a lot of people didn't want to leave Serbia, and so they were sent to wreak havoc upon the population that they deemed as their enemy. And so in Srebrenica, they've invaded, they've shot a lot of people, but a lot of people have seek refuge in this compound run by the UN. So the UN tell them that they're going to be safe, but unfortunately there's contradictory sort of comments from the upper echelons that really put a lot of nerves and anxiety into the mix. And so we have the main character, Aida, who is a UN translator for the Bosnians. She has a family of her own that she's desperately trying to save, but she also wants to save the thousands of people that had no idea what's going to happen to them. And so as she's making her way through to the UN headquarters, she's trying to talk to them, but unfortunately the longer it goes on, these discussions, the more she realises they might be on their own. So what happens at that point on is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on QUO VADIS, Aida. This movie was actually nominated for the Best Foreign Film of 2020 at the Oscars, and so that was saying something. Now a lot of people don't really respect the Oscars, but when films like this get recognition is something that really opens my eyes, especially in the foreign cinema, off-world cinema. And so coming into this film, I thought, alright, well this is going to be interesting, because Mads Mikkelsen's Another Round, I believe, was the one that won that year. And so I liked that movie, but I was wondering what this film was going to produce, because it actually documents horrible events. Now the Bosnian War, this is really upsetting. Now all wars in general are upsetting, but this war especially, just the cruelty and the sheer depravity that this war actually demonstrated just hit me on the nerve. And so I have to be in a specific mood to watch this film. And so I hadn't watched it for so long. I had it on the DVD for years, but I just wasn't in the mood to watch it, because as I said, it is very upsetting. And so I finally found my mood, and I watched this movie, and I will say that I was absolutely blown away at how harrowing this movie was, but also how respectful it was to the victims of Srebrenica genocide. So this is a film that just shows you the cruelty of humanity, the cruelty and just the depravity, and how humanity can change with a flick of a switch. Basically, if the upper echelons of the government say that this is your enemy, then all of a sudden past friendships are put on hold, and now they are seen as less than human. And so what happens in this film was just incredibly tragic, because this is based on a true story and you know the outcome. And what this movie does, it gives you shades of humanity and shades of decency, but because you know the outcome, if you read up on history, then this is what makes it even more sad. And so this is the really depressing nature that this movie really conveys, and it's just a lesson in history that needs to be remembered, but you'd rather not remember it. And so this movie hardly has any violence, and this is where I could talk about the respect. It wasn't glorifying the violence, it wasn't showing you cathartic violence, it was all what was implied. And so that was something that I really liked. It didn't need to show violence. We all know about the history of the Srebrenica genocide, and so we don't need to be shown bloodshed, but what we need to be shown, as I said, is the humanity amongst all the inhumanity. And so the main performance from Jasna Juricic was absolutely phenomenal. She really makes this movie, because she is a really good person, and she knew Bosnian Serbs that she's up against, and she used to teach with them. She used to be their friends, and the way that she communicates with the Bosnian Serbs, some of the Bosnian Serbs, I thought was really heartwarming, but at the same time it wasn't received in a neutral manner. I thought as though their responses were very cold. And so these were very young people in the Bosnian Serbs, and so this is how corruptive this can be. And the corruptive nature of this film is led by the character of Ratko Mladic. Now Ratko Mladic is a real war criminal. He's serving a life sentence in The Hague, and his character in this movie is absolutely terrifying. Again, very subdued, very subtle. Doesn't need to be a monster in the dark. It doesn't need to be a horror icon like Jason Voorhees. It's just a human being, and that's what makes it even more scary, is that all these characters are painted as human beings. They have likeable qualities, they have qualities about them that you could actually see, okay, well that was something that I can relate to, but unfortunately because of what they've done, this is what causes the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up, because these people have committed atrocities and treated human beings in such ways that you just don't want to acknowledge actually happened, but unfortunately you can't help but acknowledge it, because it happened. And if you're going to learn from history, you have to actually know what happened. And so this movie really forces you to open your eyes to the not only the horrors committed by the Bosnian Serbs, but also the useless nature of the UN in this particular occasion. The useless, upper echelons that were dictating what should happen. And so it almost like they wanted to wipe their hands clean of this. And so they were there to protect these Bosniaks, and they were told that everything was going to be all right. But then, unfortunately, there's a lot of contradictory sort of answers that these generals got from their commanders. And unfortunately, this is where it came that the losers in this movie were the Bosniaks. And so those that were sworn to protect them let them down and basically lambs to the slaughter. And so that was the heartbreaking aspect of this movie. As I said, it was all very subdued and very, very subtle. It was more about negotiations and the breakdown of negotiations and the consequences of those breakdowns. I thought was absolutely hard hitting. The main character, her family, what she goes through, I thought was incredibly tough, because you get so much likability to the main character because she cares about these other people just as much as she does about her own family. And so this was not only a family, it was a community, and this community was being hounded, and unfortunately the evil forces in life often outshine those that are weaker. And so we'd like to acknowledge that the good guy always wins, but unfortunately, if we're in reality, the corruptive nature of evil often outshines, those that can't really defend themselves very well. And so I just thought as though the whole film had a level of ferocity to the pacing to it, that it was just a lot of dialogue, but you feel as though there's a sense of panic. You feel as though, all right, I'm on the edge of my seat, and you don't know why. But the reason why you know why is that you want to rewrite history inside this film. As I said, you know how this is going to end, but because the movie is made in such a way that has glimpses of humanity, you want to change the course of history yourself, and you're so desperate to do that, but unfortunately at the end you realise, okay, that is just something that could never happen, and that's what makes you really, really depressed. And so the whole film has that level of depression that Schindler's List had, that Hotel Rwanda had. And so this is a film that, like those two films, actually showed a lot of respect to the victims, and the end of this movie was just absolutely heartbreaking. And so if it sounds like your kind of thing, go in there very carefully. As I said, this is very, very depressing. Some really horrible things happen. It's terrifying in a very subtle way, it's very depressing in a subtle way, and just the whole respectful nature of this movie just makes it even more impressive. And so it's one of those movies that hits you like a ton of bricks. You probably don't want to watch it again, and that to me is something that I feel this story really needed. And so overall, for QUO VADIS Aida, I'm going to give this one 4.5 stars. I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.